welcome to the show, or this moment in time where Geoff and PJ hop on Zoom to make a pilot of a podcast because shit, haven't done this before. How you doing, man?
Good. Doing well. It's been actually a pretty hectic last few days, more than usual. Although today I was able to get out to the beach, do some running, did some swimming, which was great. Surfboard's still broken, but fixing it up. Yeah, it's a whole story, but hoping to get out on the waves later this week. We got Hurricane Elsa coming into Florida in the next few days, and will probably be tropical storm by then. But on the back end, well, the front end and the back end, especially the back end, should see some really good waves. So that's what I'm hoping to do.
Nice.
What
I didn't
about
know
you?
you surfed. I didn't know you did
I
that.
know, sad excuse for surfing. It's not really. It's like trying to surf. People will be interested in this. I snapped a foam top in half. I don't know if you guys know what a foam top surfboard is, but it's nearly impossible to snap in half, and I did it. So,
wow. Congratulations. I don't know what that is, but
very buoyant surfboard. You know, it's just one of the foam ones.
Oh, I see.
Ones. Yeah.
So okay. And therefore, if it's super buoyant and super foam, they're pretty rigid and resilient. And if you broke one, that means you were like messing it up pretty bad.
Yeah, it means I was paddling, and there's, break right into the shore break as it's called, and just dumped me over, and I snapped it in half. So,
oh my goodness,
that's my claim to. So if you mean that by surfing, that's what I do. And there's a dog playing in the kennel right next to me, so I'm gonna have to take him out so he's not so noisy.
Oh my goodness, and I think I just had a dog come through. Oh, hi, thank you. Wait. The muting of PJ and the dog. My wife just brought me something to eat, but I'm not going to eat right now. We're recording. So, hi, listener. Bear with us. We're just working out the kinks and have a plan. But part of the plan is we're just going to share this unedited just to get great feedback from our network and our community. So you'll get these little interstitials here because we're not really planning to clean this one up. So hi. Well, yeah, okay. I like the surfing metaphor vibe because I mean, really, when you look at the Three Horizon stuff, they are kind of like waves, and like trough and crest and trough, and how do we surf that in the sense of being Earth Regenerators who are seeking resilience and an ability to work on the land where we are from the mindset of the future being a butterfly future, third horizon, yet being very, very much in the present caterpillar state, right? So like we're going to be doing a lot of surfing, and I feel like these caterpillar vibes are going to definitely break some boards and some choppy waters. But I think it's the whole getting back up there and give it another run that's going to get us somewhere with something, know.
I think recently in my conversations and in my life, I've been noticing how much not in control any one of us is in terms of like, social change or making the change, right? Of like influencing, and how it can lead to frustration. If, for instance, I'll take an example of the consulting company that I'm working on, Just Capital Quotient. Thinking about how what we want to be doing is exactly that, Geoff, that you mentioned about helping people to build cocoons in the business sense, right? So like do business practices, change their business in a way where it allows them to be, what they're actively doing is building for this, Horizon 2 stuff. And we can influence them to do that so that it can enable Horizon 3 type stuff. And it gets frustrating at times because you're like, wow, really what I feel like I need to be doing almost is just making enough of a living somehow that this current system values economically and in monetary terms, and not just but like economically, meaning it rewards me for doing things for it or other people. And then essentially just like saying, okay, I'm going to do that with part of my time for like as little time as possible to make that happen. And then the other part of my time, and maximize the other, as much as I can, the other stuff, to really just like try to live my life and my lifestyle and do the things that aren't rewarded monetarily or by the current system in an economic fashion, to help build out that other, that Horizon 2, Horizon 3 that we're talking about. And the more, I go back and forth on this, and I guess recently the pendulum is sort of swung back the other way, where it's like, yeah, you can't change anything. And really all you can change is like what you personally can do and how you feel alive. And so try to do that and do what you need to be doing to feel like you are alive and taking care of yourself and those close to you, and then living out in the way that you in all the ways that you can, except maybe monetarily.
Well, that's interesting. I mean,
yeah,
I hear you basically talking about, wanting to live a life where you can bring your whole self to the table and do the things that fill you up and enjoy life, while at the same time being provided for in an economic sense, right? Like, so for me, there, all the talk of universal basic income is really interesting, because, the thought of what would you do if you didn't have to work to survive, right? And man, that's probably a topic for a future episode right there. Moral philosophy, because I think immediately on that concept of sharing the wealth and the wealth of nations, which I think of Adam Smith and his, deification on the pedestal of capitalism. Yet you really can't have a full sense of what he was writing about in The Wealth of Nations without also reading his theory of moral sentiments.
Yep.
Because you need an understanding of his sense of morality and his ethical considerations, and like what, where those right and wrong, good and bad circles are drawn around his perspective, before you jump into the whole, Wealth of Nations type thing. Because I think to take it to today and go, there's people that feel productivity, in the financial sense. I mean, well, extending to like neoliberal capitalism, like there's this entire idea that wealth is virtue, and your ability to create wealth demonstrates your virtuousness. And if you do not have wealth, then you are clearly not virtuous, and therefore to be shunned, because you must have done something wrong because you don't have the virtue of the dollar of capital. And this is, it's one of those hidden frames that most people don't think about. When people, when my experience with people on the right, when they get up in arms about commies, and they worry about all of the communist ideas, it's like, I think it's because they don't understand that they've bought into a worldview that says your worth as a human is defined by your bank account.
Mhm.
And they're expecting to someday, what is the phrase, the temporarily inconvenienced millionaires, right?
Mhm.
They're expecting one day to like, join that pedestal, but like look at the numbers of how many ultra wealthy there actually are. The game is clearly rigged, and I'm not going to go into that here, but to say that the ethical and moral underpinnings of any economic system like has to be reckoned with before you set up a strategy for sharing the wealth. Because to me, and my way of looking at things, and every human has inherent worth and value just from being human, and being a member of the community should entitle you to a share of the benefits of the collective whole. Because in my view, there is no separation, there's only connection. Whether I'm in the fields or in an office or at home on the couch, like in theory, energetically, I'm contributing to the human experience.
Mhm.
And if we had a compensation system that rewarded our humanness first and foremost, and then provided additional bumps for actually doing specific things, right? Then those that didn't want to do any specific things and can survive off that minimum amount, they're good on the couch, or they're good writing songs, or talking to people, or making other people smile, or whatever it is. Like there's a lot of so-called low value jobs that aren't really jobs. Nobody really wants to pay for them. Some people like to do them. So what if people could just do the things they liked without having to get paid for doing that?
Mhm.
Then that provides this basic baseline of security for everyone, and then not having to worry about giving your time and energy to something that you hate. What would you do if you could look for something that you love? So I look at how do we as context creators, right, take this idea. I call it incorporating good, which is basically intending the positive outcome in the future that we imagine for this undertaking, and coming back to our strategic plan from that place in the future where we've manifest something that's expressing more good and harming no one. And in that space, like, how do we now build a plan to do some things to get to a place? And right now, you and I are associated as members of Earth Regenerators network. And if you're listening to this and you're unfamiliar, we'll have a link for finding that space, because there is a growing community of people that are all about facing the reality of our situation and working towards a future that we can leave our grandchildren that has a thriving world instead of one that is rapidly escalating into catastrophic feedback loops. So Earth Regenerators is the thing. You and I both were participants as hosts in recently completed learning journey in regenerative finance, where we learned that really what makes finance regenerative, and by extension, what makes anything regenerative, is supporting the ability for life to thrive. And a very important component of that is supporting the um, individual's ability to be inspired and to be filled spiritually with things that are meaningful for their heart, right? And the more that we work on sort of replenishing our inspirational capital and becoming more aligned with the world that we want to manifest, right, and then engaging in economic activity from that place, that's doing regenerative finance, right? So
Mhm.
the regenerative aspect is more about the mindset from which the financial tools are wielded, rather than anything about the tools themselves.
Right.
And and we got into, how this pro-social process is an important step in that any group that's going to endeavor to take on anything, whether it's a small team that's doing a startup idea, or a group that's working on a land restoration project, or any place where humans are coming together, the pro-social process allows the group to recognize and acknowledge their shared identity and shared purpose, and from that place work together to be an effective group in whatever the group's goals are. And if you weave together the pro-social frame with the idea of creating regenerative business ideas that can lead to thriving for people involved, there's definitely a path for creating what I believe the best summary of this is Melanie Ryback's framing of post-growth entrepreneurship. And the idea of post-growth, which we'll get into, and down the line, I'll do an episode on post-growth and why you should care. But ultimately, if we're looking at the business, if we're looking at spending our human energy on things that we enjoy and being supported financially from that endeavor, we need infrastructure to support that. We need the scaffolding to allow us to set something up, test it, and move it into production, making sure that it's not accidentally violating our values and becoming non-regenerative because of some decisions that are made, but instead growing to be a regenerative enterprise that is also flowing financial benefit back into the community it's in, and its members and its customers. And there's a whole cycle of flow based on these principles. And PJ is now working with an incubator set up in Earth Regenerators to help people that get this idea. They're like, yes, we want to, we have this idea, it's a regenerative one, we want to figure out how to make it happen. We maybe need some help from other people, or we need some technology support, or we need to be introduced to the right potential customers, but we need to take this idea and grow it into something, and we need a place that's like-minded where we can work on that. And so you want to talk about the incubator here?
Sure, I can talk about that. Yeah, first I want to mention that actually I want to do another series of what we are ongoing with right now, but we're doing we call it Carrying the Conversation in Earth Regenerators, specifically around, it's inspired in part by what Tyson Yunkaporta provided us in Sand Talk, his awesome book, Sand Talk. Yes, that one right there. And it's sort of like a derivative of that, because yarning is what he talked about, which is what the Aboriginal ways of coming to know complex systems and the world, and being able to see the gems, so to say, or everything that is happening in relation to each other. It's just it's so great. Highly recommend reading it. But we have a thing in Earth Regenerators sort of derived from that called campfires, where it's sort of just free form, like yarns are, just free form, show up and just talk and get to know each other, and just see where the conversation goes, see where the yarn spins. And Carrying the Conversation is a more focused version of a campfire, where we are coming around a very specific topic or thing that we really want to be talking about and gathering around. And so I have been hosting a series of, I call it the 2x2, Thursday twice and Friday twice. So yesterday in the morning and at night, and today in the morning, and then I have another one here after we get off. But specifically around what Geoff had mentioned, the learning journey in regenerative finance, something that came up during that was value. This concept of value, as our current system defines it, you always hear it. Yeah, like make sure you
Value
add
creation, value proposition.
value proposition, the whole deal. So this thing of, in big quotes, value, right? Like what the heck is that? Number one. And then number two, value versus values. And this conversation, man, I tell you, it has been really rich and has gone down some really cool and interesting places, all of which we've sort of touched on here a little bit. But really what's come alive that you touched on briefly is how much it does at the core revolve around the individual and around the inspiration and the aliveness of the individual and dreaming. You know, it's got to start with someone and a group of people, but dreaming essentially and visualizing and really just like leaning into and living into what makes you alive. And there's it's sort of like, I mean, we mentioned about how we can't just include humans in this, right? The anthropocentric view. I would argue in a way that true, like, or it, not maybe true, because there's probably different levels of true, right, in your aliveness. But in my experience, the more grounded and like inclusive of the just life in all forms I like my view is, or like what I'm doing, or like how my being is, like how my spirit is, the more alive I feel. And so that I'm, you know, we say like make sure we include the human in what we're doing. In my mind, I have a theory that it's really just how do we become more and more alive constantly? Because in doing that, that will sort of inherently include other beings and life in general, because life is relation and interconnectedness, like you're talking about. And that is what makes us feel alive, is seeing that and knowing that and participating in that and participating in the abundance and flourishing of life. So that all being said, those are great, and I want to keep doing those conversations. We're going to post the recordings from those, so you can find those in Earth Regenerators under the group of Carrying the Conversation, and want to have another go at those. The Incubator is something different, and we're sort of feeling into what exactly it is, but really good stuff that's happened so far. Really, at the core, we want it to be a nurturing space centered around relations. Relationship-based incubator, basically, is what I've been calling it, where that encompasses not only relationships with humans, but relationships with other life. And whereas if you think of a normal incubator or accelerator, more so, but even a traditional business incubator that you might find, yeah, there is some aspect of relation, but it is very much focused on the business or the project, and almost like, let's put it through a manufacturing process. Let's put it through this machine and let's get it out to the other end so that it can grow and make money and do the thing that it's supposed to do, in the project design. What we're trying to do in the incubator is we want it to feel differently, in the fact that we want it to be an environment where anybody, no matter how many skills or how little skills, or who they are, or what they want to do, as long as they are aligned in the shared identity and purpose of Earth regeneration and regenerating our biosphere, and have ideas or want to help in any capacity, but even don't know how. the incubator is a place where everybody can go, and you can go and get plugged in, and you can meet others and be surrounded in a nurturing environment, so that when you do have an idea, it's supported and it's nurtured, and you are nurtured, and you feel like you can share ideas and participate with the creation of this whole thing that we're trying to do. So yeah, again, it's really nascent currently, but it's got its own separate space now in the Earth Regenerators network on the Mighty Networks platform, and got some really that are percolating in there. Everything from just real like inklings, seedlings of an idea, like not even like a seed really of an idea, to businesses that are fully formed and essentially just need a retooling in a way, or a rethinking, or some more support as to like, how can I do some transformation here with my business to make it even more even more regenerative of humans in the biosphere, and more impactful in that way. So,
well, what's the format that you're building? So I heard you say using Earth Regenerators, I presume sort of the courseware format of that platform, but are you like regularly meeting in person via Zoom to work together, or is it more asynchronous, like assignments, and like, is there a formal structure or curriculum for the cohort members to, how they're working together and what they're expected to do during the time of the incubator? Like, how's that set up?
Yeah, so it's looks like my internet connection's unstable. Hold on one second. I'm gonna switch.
We will not be editing these either.
Nope.
I've had a couple glitches. It may
Same.
be that we have I wonder how the video records is really my question at the end.
Oh, did I lose you completely?
I don't know. It just did
Test,
something.
test.
Looks like I am still recording on my side.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, good.
Okay, great.
You're back.
Yeah.
Picking up again.
Okay, so yeah, the format of the incubator right now, we meet on Zoom 2 times a week currently, from 8 p.m. Eastern time to 9:30 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays, and from 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays. And right now, those are less structured. So we've had 3 weeks so far within what we're terming this incubator. The first week was very unstructured, was very just like, let's come together and let's talk about what we think this should look like or what we want to see. Week 2 was more structured. It was, we did advisory circles around projects. So we have 4 main tools in the incubator right now, I guess, types of meetings that we want to be having to help people in their projects. One being an advisory circle, one being a design session, one being a teach-in, where we can bring, even people outside the Earth Regenerators network to come in and teach on a particular topic or skill, or something that we feel that a lot of the project ideas or people within the incubator need. And then number 4, I always forget this one because we haven't really had a need for it yet. It'll come to me.
Okay.
But anyway, week number 2 was we had 2 different design or advisory circles where one person's in the middle, with their idea, or the idea or the project is in the middle, and we are supporting and going around and listening to what this idea is, and this person is, and who this person is, and providing support through questions, through questions first, and then advice or support, and other stuff that you might want to comment on that to help see differently, to help think differently, and to help maybe remove barriers that might be there. So yeah, then this last week was less structured as well, just because we got through the first sort of wave of design or advisory circles, and now there's a lot of structural work on the Mighty Networks platform that I need to do, in terms of even like putting up like, this is what the incubator is. So like this segment right here within this recording will actually help with that.
Well, and on that, like, I'll invite you then to, like, tap my strategic mindset, and like, what areas might you need help, or what are some things that you need scaffolding for in like supporting the like management of the process of hosting an incubator, not so much being in an incubator, as a participant, but like building the context. Like,
Yeah.
what I know, we kicked something around earlier about some not today, but in a prior conversation around like a one-page plan and some
Absolutely.
objectives and whatnot. But I don't know, maybe you want to ask me some questions, or something. So turn the table on me, let me talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess more so. Oh, okay.
That dog is really like needs to be heard.
Yeah, it's got
I heard that big sigh.
So specifically, I'm going to tie this then to this podcast here, and think, how do you see incorporating good in what you're trying to do here, being able to benefit those who are in the incubator or have ideas, and how, if anything, do you see these two entities colliding, weaving, interrelating with each other?
Well, I think I've got a couple ways to address that. On the one hand, I'm thinking about this podcast as, on one level, being sort of a repository of knowledge and resources, right? So, in fact, how I kind of got the last nudge to pull this together is, while you started the incubator, I began hosting just, one-on-one advisory calls open to any member of the community. And I had a call with somebody who, at the end, he said, "Oh, it'd be really neat if you just like recorded these calls and, shared it just as a exercise in transparency, or just, sharing the knowledge." I'm like, I like that. Then he added this, he's like, "I could see you doing like have the video with like an annotated transcription with notes and other information that you provided during the call, like, available." And I'm like, oh, I see where you're going with that. That's a great idea, because I have a lot of that. I've been pulling information together for a decade now on this topic.
Yeah, you guys don't understand. If anybody's listening and they don't know what Geoff has access to, the amount, the dude has just databases, just so much good stuff. And so I'm glad that you got the nudge to get some of that out here for people to use.
Me too, because one of the things I've been wanting to do for, more years than I can remember, I see. It's interesting, because I'll throw a little plug in here for Yaska and human design, because and we're not going to talk about that more today, except maybe a link, and you'll find out more if you don't know already. But what I've learned getting into my particular type within human design is, like, I can go back to my all my projects throughout my life and see where, like, when somebody brings me in and I'm excited and then I help them build or produce something, I'm having fun. But at some point, they would flip a switch and ask me to go sell it or go take it, go do something else with it, which is more manifestor energy, which, so I'm a generator. I respond to stuff. Manifestors can initiate and inform and create stuff. And every time I had to go out and like try to start a market, create some interest, whatever, things would just not work out because apparently my energy doesn't invite people to receive the information as an initiation. If someone comes to me and asks and I tell them, it goes somewhere. But if it's just me trying to push it, it doesn't work. And it was fascinating for me to reflect on all of these experiences I've had through that lens and realize that, like, every time I get off the rails, I'm trying to be manifestor, initiating something. But every time I'm just in cruise mode and enjoying stuff and things are going well, I'm in generator mode. So taking that into the now, I have all these books that are relevant. Some, when I first wanted to do this, they were brand new, but now not so much. And I still need to get caught up with these basically video book reports or book reviews where I'm not going to necessarily get into all the specific details of what's in the book, but I'm going to talk about the context for that book and why it would matter to you from a regenerative perspective, like Frederick Laloux's Reinventing Organizations, right? Which is, when I read it, like, that's what shifted me completely. Okay, business forms are shifting, but the business models aren't. So there's going to be a disconnect. Like, we need to figure out a way to bridge this. And so, like, I get super excited, and I know a couple people I recommended the book to that went and read it, but I never recorded that video, and nobody ever got to hear my thoughts unless they heard it directly from me. And and for me, I'm like, whatever, I'm busy, I'm doing all this other stuff, and I just never was able to initiate, like, getting my own website out there, putting stuff together and sharing it. So essentially what we just hacked with this human design thing, and PJ's a manifester, I'm a generator. PJ has the ability to make things come into existence by speaking. I don't, but I have the ability to create things and to synthesize things and to learn from the past in order to make a clearer understanding of the future, which it's interesting because I can't go market myself because I can only act in response to a request. So I imagine at some point, just people are going to get referred. Hey, you should go talk to Geoff. Why? Just do it. Because really, that's all it comes down to. Like, I don't know how I'm going to help you until we talk. And then you say something, I'm like, oh, are you aware of this? Did you hear about that? Do you know this thing? And then then game's on. And I really see this podcast filling that with giving me an outlet for aggregating that content, right? Like doing an episode, maybe slipping one of my, book reports into an episode, right? And just a little segment, or, it's just a vehicle to, like, bring all that together and then have a website that has all the episodes stored somewhere with all those show notes where you could go in and dive really deep and go get the tangential information, because I'm the king of the tangent. This is the crazy shit. Since I was in college, I swear to God, my favorite professor, my advisor, was also king of the tangent. It's funny because you knew if you get him on a tangent with a question early in class, like, the whole class is over and never got into anything he was supposed to do. Because it went all on this round journey. So, and I'm usually able to tie it back to why I jumped into it, right? But in reality, I'm going to be trying to honor everybody's time and not have, hour-long episodes, but to really take the content I create and edit it down and try to stay under 20 minutes with each episode, having a very specific focus. And PJ and I might have a conversation like this that leads to 3 or 4 different episodes, but ultimately I want to be able to like weave in different resources, different contexts, be able to send you on a sub quest to go figure out what does he mean by slicing pie? How would that relate to a cooperative versus, decision making versus ownership share? There's a whole there's a whole thread on that particular one to unravel. And it's fascinating how many options we have. Because I think actually one of my underlying beliefs and themes that's going to show up throughout this, I think, is that at the end of the day, and this is like a super important, this is like my anthropologist hat coming on. People have opinions about stuff like capitalism and money and corporations and government, right? Like all of these concepts have a lot of triggering power for people depending on their experience with them. But ultimately, the lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I see your notes coming in, but they're distracting me. And I
know.
don't have it open right now, so they pop up when you send them. So I haven't looked
Sorry.
at them, except when I see them, they distract me.
Yeah, that note.
I'll leave it there and move it out of the way so it'll come up, but I can look at it afterwards.
Yeah.
And and I think my underlying point here was that all of these forms, corporations, money, whatever, they're tools. They're tools that humans created to solve a problem. And a tool is in and of itself neutral, right? A hammer can drive a nail into wood. A hammer also functionally can shatter a skull, right? But it's really a human making a choice to use a hammer as a weapon and shatter a skull with it that is bad. The hammer itself is not bad. The hammer is just a tool, and it's being wielded inappropriately by someone with wrong intentions. But same thing with money, corporations, business, right? They're just tools, and ultimately all legislation and regulation around the operation of business, those laws that get drafted at the federal, state, or local level, they're jurisdictional in scope, and they're just agreements between parties that are operating in a way that these agreements, they agree to have these agreements govern their behavior with regards to one another in some sort of business endeavor. And the thing about all of like at the core, where the incubator is so important for not just changing like the way business ideas get brought about, but changing the underlying mindsets and agreements that operate business, right? Because all like B Corps, for example, right? It's you invoke it in your bylaws and you declare certain things to be true for your entity, and then they give you a certification, which is useful for you in the market for differentiating your company from other companies, and to an audience that might be important for. And yet, at the end of the day, you're just like adding some self-ruling agreements into your bylaws that you're now committing yourself to abide by, although there's no legal repercussion should you fail to conform. Like, you're not breaking the law, but this is where that you can have your own code of ethics that's more stringent than the legal code of ethics, right? But at some outer boundary, there's the here's the legality operating this, and you're like, that doesn't go far enough. I want to actually make my personal agreements about legality like this condensed, and I'm not going outside of here, even though it says I can do these kinds of business activities legally. I don't think they're ethical. I don't think they're aligned with the planet's best interest, life's best interest. So I'm not going to engage those, right? There's not a jurisdiction yet that's going to impose that as a legal restriction on people, but you can make that choice in how you set up your business. And you can make that choice in the forms you choose to incorporate under, and the organizational and operational models you choose to use to run that business, right? And so having this sort of reframe about approaching business from a regenerative perspective to come into this context and build something new in, as we alluded to earlier, in a sort of caterpillar landscape where you can eat the whole leaf if you want, right? But you're like, no, I want to leave the leaf so I can land on it later when I'm flying around. So I want there to be leaves then too. So I got to lay those eggs. If caterpillars eat all the leaves, there'd be no places for butterflies to lay eggs. So butterflies are like, okay, well, we're gonna, make sure that, okay, our species doesn't like these kinds of leaves. At least they'll be there for us to, whatever, right? The metaphors can go on and on. The point being that creating space for people to come together and think about perspectives like these and why they would matter in sort of setting your intention for your business and setting your objectives on how are you going to operate and how are you going to even decide whether or not you want to sell to a particular customer or create a particular product, right? These are all becoming ethical considerations. Are they aligned with a regenerative planet? Or, wow, I created some cool software and Exxon Mobil will give me $10 million for it. Like, do you really want to support them improving their operations somehow? Or, wouldn't we rather see them fully convert to, renewables and get rid of the fossil fuel extraction altogether, right? So like these considerations, like there's probably a window in which, yes, I can help them transition. I will sell to them to help them become a better regenerative citizen, but I'm not going to sell to them to help them get more oil out of the crust, right? So you have these criteria to balance out good and bad, right and wrong, and you bring this as a founder for the organization. You bring it in to the beginning of the organization. You stick it in the intention of here's how I want this to show up and operate for the world. And you do that at the beginning. You can't like create your product market fit and then go, oh yeah, now let's like stamp some, let's greenwash some principles on it and say, oh yeah, we stand for this stuff. It's like, it doesn't work that way. You got to, and this is where pro-social and the shared identity and shared purpose come in, is like, if you have those and you have these values aligned with the regenerative stand, and you have this intention for the good you want to create in the world with your energy and your activity, then like that's the good you're incorporating into the creation of your business. And then that good is the stand your business takes in the world. And whatever products or services emerge from that business, that organizational entity, will be aligned with that intention and will serve that good. And so I think bringing like those ideas or those reframes and shifts in consciousness into the incubator is where, I think we have this potential to, prototype a model that others will get wind of and start just following the steps of bringing the intentionality in and inserting it into the business creation and making it part of the organizational DNA, so that whatever comes out down the road, whether people change, come and go, that will be part of that organization's own like existence, its own soul or aura, if you will. And by creating those intentionally, we're gifting the future with businesses that will be ready to behave like butterflies when we get to that stage. So I think that's really how there's, a lot of synergy and a lot of opportunity to not just provide resource to the incubator, community, but also, bring folks from the incubator into the show to talk about, how they're addressing a particular problem, or, what they're seeing with whatever area, whatever bioregion, whatever market type idea they're working on, and how, how they see that. And then by showcasing these, right, maybe someone else listening goes, oh, I wanted to work on that. And gee, now we've got somebody to come in and help them. So it's kind of like maybe some marketing and outreach to support the incubator as well. Ultimately, if we, expand the audience beyond just the core Earth Regenerators network, then, brand new people could be learning about these things and not just want to help on someone's idea, but also they want to become an Earth Regenerator because they realize they already were, they just didn't know there was a community they could join.
Yeah. Boom. That's good. I like that a lot. And it makes a lot of sense. I wanted to touch, I think we have enough time for this, at least to maybe talk about it succinctly. But you mentioned something that really, I think it really gets down into some interesting things. You just sort of hinted at it, but you said when you were talking about Frederick Laloux and his business forms, right? And you said business forms are changing, but I think you said the core or like the value that's there at, that what it creates, right, is not changing yet. And therein, there is a disconnect between the form and the function. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I look at it this way, like he calls them teal organizations, right? And he says they have their own emergent purpose as an organization. And they provide a place where there's like self-management, self-organization, and wholeness. Employees can bring their whole self to work. They don't have to compartmentalize, right? They're more, consciously open, right, than maybe earlier stage companies that are more rigid or hierarchical. And what he's pointed to, right, with the emergence of the B Corp and sociocracy and holacracy as organization decision-making practices, like there's now a good body of work of here's how organizations sort of begin to manifest and assume their identity of what they're going to be. But the core of business operating technologies, from manufacturing and operations to HR, IT, logistics, or just the simple act of legally incorporating something and creating the financial benefit and ownership model that would be aligned with regenerative post-growth type thinking, like those forms aren't very clear. There's not a lot for that right now. I mean, there's some examples of companies doing this, right? But there's not at scale like jurisdictional support for here's how you create your business context in such a way that you can protect the purpose and intention of the organization from potential violation of fiduciary responsibility lawsuits from stakeholders or shareholders, right? There's a certain bit of risk involved in sort of deviating from profit motive as the prime objective of business. And that space is really where, this entire movement needs to sort of catalyze, because we know that business as usual, operating as usual is destructive and it's not sustainable for the planet. Extractive models are just, they exploit and move on. It's locusts, it's cancer, it's not healthy. And if we want to have business systems that are regenerative and are aligned with a healthy earth for all life, we need to ultimately have some protocols for how we operate and organize and run businesses. And that becomes guidance, best practices, ultimately legislation, like the OSHA and work, no child labor laws and all that. Ultimately it's labor laws around, caring for the planet, bioregion, context, all of that is going to happen because we have these types of organizations emerging, because these types of organizations will that into being and create it for themselves. But ultimately, there's not a blueprint or a role model to follow yet but I can tell you it'll get there eventually, right? So how do we help somebody that's starting now with what they've got, like not just dance within the context of the current, model, but also start tuning their own business bylaws and profit sharing models and everything else, tuning it for a way of being that isn't quite here yet, or at least there's not a lot of obvious open source collective commons examples that people can follow that map this transition. So I think that's really like the disconnect is, you're trying to build a regenerative butterfly business using current Wetiko Caterpillar tools, and it's like trying to paint your white fence with the paintbrush you just used on your red doorway without washing it, and you're going to get the fence covered in red. Like that's using the broken systems to build the future systems. There's going to put some of the qualities of the broken systems into your future systems, and who knows whether they'll be a Trojan horse that messes with it later, or fall off like an extra limb and be irrelevant. Like it may or may not matter, but if we want to steward that future into existence, then we need to make it matter for us and name it at the beginning as like in scope or out of scope, if you will, so that it's part of the regenerative entity design process rather than just being an afterthought.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes to something that you mentioned that we were talking about regarding spirituality and religion in a way, but doing you have to first name the good, right? In order to incorporate the good. So we have to play the game a little bit that we like to call, which I'm excited for, the segment, Aikido or Wetiko, which is great. Bringing examples that we see of ideas that may seem good, have great intention. And I know a lot of people have written about this, and there's a number of good books and articles about it, but essentially good ideas or intentions, or bad ideas or bad intentions with seemingly good faces. And thinking, okay, is this really what it claims to be? Or is this not? And sort of picking that apart, because it is, I mean, like you mentioned, this whole thing that we're talking about, it is more or less a moral framework, an ethical framework. It's what is right, what is wrong, or what to do, what not to do, what is good, what is not.
Or what is the jurisdictional framing you will choose to operate under in order to define good and not good. And for me, to be clear, supports life and the expression of more life and harms no one, including myself, right? Like that's what is good. It supports the expansion of life. If it's working against life, like, okay, maybe there's some gray area stuff around, caregiving, end of life transition stuff that, would arguably improve quality of life while ending physical life. But, that's again, that is a moral and ethical stance to take as to what is and isn't life affirming. And I'm just saying, like, if we look to the legal jurisdiction or the country, jurisdiction level versus all of life on the planet level, right? You're going to have you're basically at differing levels othering someone from being in your in-group, and your rules apply to your in-group, they don't apply to the out-group, and therefore, it's just another form of apartheid. And so to create a moral framework for business ethics that affirm all life on the planet, like you necessarily have to take a position of we're all connected, we're all together, we're all one. There is no other. Even though you live on the other side of the planet, or you look different than me, or you think differently than me, or speak different than me, we're still necessary for each other's well-being. We are interconnected as part of the web of life. And me exploiting your labor because you have a different currency is no better than, me drinking your blood so that I can survive. Because, vampire companies will do that to you. Or not. Anyhow, that's where I sit on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said you haven't read Debt by David Graeber, have you?
No, I'm not. I've skimmed some parts of it, but I'm not deeply familiar yet.
It's so good. I finally finished it. It is so good. Like, it just brings just a level and a layer of understanding that just helps me so much. But one key learning that I had from it that I've been sort of speaking about to see what people who know more than me think about it, as it applies to the various areas that we're talking about, is this notion of the only way you can have an empire or a state or a market economy is by ripping people out of their context and out of their place, because then that is the first creation of essentially all market economies are based on violence and slavery.
Separate you from your land. You cannot take care of yourself. Exactly. You go looking for a way to take care of yourself and say, hey, I got a job for you. I'll give you money and you can feed yourself that way.
Right.
And your job is you're a soldier on the front line in this other place that you don't know, so you can't escape.
Exactly. And making things equal. Sorry, the dogs are barking. There's 4 of them.
The dog's upset. I'm upset. That's a horrible idea, Empire.
You want to see this? They're just, there's 4 of them playing on a couch.
Oh my.
Huge huskies, too. Hey, you guys want to take it outside? Go outside. Let's go outside. Go outside. Go on. Go on. Go on. All right, hold on. I'm going to let him out 1 second. Come on.
And this is life. It's fantastic because, that's very real.
All right. So, yeah. And I've been thinking then, and it's really like what, all the indigenous leaders are saying, or anybody really in the culture, in an indigenous culture, what Joe has been talking about in Earth Regenerators. Ah, God, they came back in right by me here.
Oh my gosh. No, not the camera.
Christmas story, all the dogs with the Bumpus's dogs. But how they talk about like relocalizing and recontextualizing everything, and starting with yourself and putting yourself in a place that you are, how that I've just been thinking about like how that looks in all various areas, and especially related to business, just because I'm in, that's like what I do is like with businesses. So it's like, how do you, because in exchange on the market for dollars and currency is like saying that 2 things are fundamentally equal when they cannot possibly be equal based on their context. Like, I'm equal to you. That's like what slavery started and what debt was like founded on, is like, I am an equal human being to you. And it's like, no, we are not equal. We are different. We are each our own unique person. Yes, we're equal in the fact of like, one life might not be worth another, but that's different than saying like life is irreplaceable. Like I cannot actually replace your life with anything else. And so I've just been constantly thinking about how does it look, just sort of like meditating on the question, like how does it look to sort of reverse that in a way? We can't reverse it because we can't go backwards. It's only evolution is forwards. We can only evolve, but how do we evolve it with that sort of like reversal in mind of, all right, if market economies and then this global scaffolded, extractive system, some call it a death cult, that we have now was based on ripping people out of context and violence and doing that, how do we go the other way? And what does that look like? Something tells me it's not so pretty, but maybe it is. I don't know. So I've just been meditating on, yeah, I guess it probably would be prettier than ripping somebody out of context and enslaving them and making them a non-human, right?
Yeah, I mean, having the opportunity to become connected to a place and really feel like you're part of that place, that's a healing balm. Even if it just starts with going out into, the yard or park near you and just taking off your shoes and, feeling the earth and let it in, right? Like so much of industrial civilization and culture has been about taming the wilds, taming the earth, and pushing it away, putting concrete down, putting floors down, putting all the separation between us and the planet, when in fact, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, like we're of that same stuff that we're walking on. And there's no difference other than I'm an animated, mud suit right now, walking around with meat and juice inside me, and then it'll all evaporate and disintegrate and be dust again, right? Like there is no separation. By acknowledging, like just reaching out to the planet where you are and stating your intention and putting yourself in harmony with that energy, like that's like the declaration that, Mother Earth, I want to come home. I want to be with you. I want to recognize you again. I'm sorry I've been away, right? And make those amends with the mother. And from there, just listen to your heart. Like listen to like what's calling you to pay attention to, because we are all part of this global system, conscious or not, right? And we use our minds to analyze and think about all our problem solving abilities, right? We're going to behave and act and show up certain ways. If we use our heart and lean into the connection that's natural with, other creatures, with the planet itself, there's really magical experiences waiting for us. And I think that's that path to create this, reconnecting. It's not like you're going to restore or return to a way things were, before your ancestral line was pulled from its ancestral land, right? That you can't get that back. All you can do is reconnect where you are and nurture the connection, because that's how we create the context that it's okay to love ourselves, because we're like part of the planet, but we're treating the planet like, our private plaything. Like, but that's us. We're treating ourselves that way. And maybe, if we thought about it that way, we'd realize that, I wouldn't really want to be treated that way. And I might feel a little guilty that I'm doing it, and maybe projecting that shadow guilt out and creating my own little issues, right? Like start there, recognize that, own it. It's okay. Accept it, bless it, forgive it, move into the next relationship, right? Like that's all we are as humans in relationship with the world.
Awesome.
So
that's a good place to stop right there.
I think so. Hey, folks watching this, I invite you to reach out to me, PJ, share your thoughts. What do you want to hear? How would you like to hear it? What format would work? Like, we're going to put this up as a video, but we've got the audio too, and we could be farming these conversations, and that's, how I'm going to start this. But um, I also love to respond to requests. I mean, I'm a generator. I wait to respond. So if you said, hey, can you tell me about blah, 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 I'll be like, I sure can. Or I might be, ooh, I've been wanting to learn about that too. Let me go dive in, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about it. But this is an invitation to anyone out there that like sees how this might plug into stuff that is going on, and bring us together. This is all about creating space where we can share knowledge and resources and sort of reaffirm the things that are working and come up with solutions for things we haven't figured out yet. And all knowing that we're coming at it from an Earth Regenerator lens. Like, we want to create a thriving, livable planet for as long, until something from outer space knocks it out of the sweet spot of the sun, that it can't live, not that we disabled it from the inside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great.
So we'll sign off, and then I'll stop recording, and then we can debrief.
Okay.
Bye, folks. Say bye, PJ.
See ya.